Welcome to this video on how to begin using your DoTouch S. We'll explore the essential features of how to get started and good practices to adopt while using it. Connect your headphones or speaker to the mini jack and charge the instrument if necessary. Once the instrument is turned on, adjust its overall volume using the central slider, which will also serve as a dial for adjusting the parameters. Let's begin with some general settings by touching the Settings button on the right of the screen. Each key that is lit up on the right-hand keyboard is a setting. For example, you can change the display of notes on the screen into either Do, Re, Mi, Fa, Sol, La, Si notation or in C, D, E, F, G, A, B notation. You can also adjust the brightness of the keys to save on battery life. For a classic and complete use of the instrument, when it is not used as a software controller, make sure that this parameter is set to this value. We also find the activation of the different sensors. Here we will activate the tactile sliders, which are located to the left and to the right of the central slider. It's in this menu that you can also try other layouts for the notes, as detailed in another video dedicated to the subject, but for now we will remain in the dualo layout. If you wish, you can also set a parametric equalizer to boost certain sound frequencies a little. Here's a small recommendation. To exit the menu, simply touch the Settings button again. By holding the Sound button on the left of the screen with the flesh of your thumb, the keyboard reveals the sound library. Acoustic sounds on the right-hand side and electronic sounds on the left. From the most percussive at the top, percussion, drums, progressively more melodious towards the bottom, bass, guitar, violin, saxophone, organ. Same thing on the other keyboard, drums, synthetic pianos, basses, leads, and pads. This logic is the same on the three sound pages, which are accessed via the three keys at the bottom of the left-hand keyboard. For example, let's go back to the piano on the first page. Once a sound has been selected, just release the Sound button to play. Each sound has 4 variants, called presets, which are accessible via the central slider. For example, here's a piano with a more enveloping sound, some lounge chords with effects on the side sliders, indicated by the pictogram on the screen, and finally, a variant with a distance type effect, again with the effects on the sliders. Small tip. To quickly change octave, that is to play higher or lower, you can stroke the right slider up or down while holding down the Sound button. It's now time to create a song. By holding down the Music button in the center of the instrument, on the left-hand keyboard, the songs in the memory of your DoTouch S will be displayed in red, again arranged over 3 pages. Let's select an empty key. Here again, changing the song will take effect when the Music button is released. Let's enter the song settings by holding down the Music button and the Settings button. As with the general settings, each key on the right-hand keyboard is a setting. We can choose a scale on the left-hand keyboard and a mode, which is a variant of the scale, using the central slider. Now let's make a track in G minor. Let's activate the metronome, which will help us at least for the first loops. And let's set the tempo a little slower. Finally, we're going to use what we call a quantizer, which will arrange the recorded notes according to different divisions of time. In other words, it will correct our rhythmic imperfections. Generally, we recommend using the value 1/4 to be able to place up to 4 notes per metronome beat, and therefore cover most uses. Again, you can exit the menu by touching the Settings button. Now let's create a short and simple song. It's often better and easier to start with the drums. In this case, let's take an electronic drum kit. Here, the color code is a bit special. The kick drums are in green, the snare drums in red, and the hi-hats in orange. Each small 3-colored group here that lets us play in a given style. Let's start with a kick drum on each beat, typical of a piece of electronic music. To record the loop, briefly tap the music button. The instrument is ready and recording begins from the first note played. Play a pattern once, then hit the center button again to stop the recording. Here we've made 4 kick drum hits, 1 on each beat. Likewise, let's record a typical snare drum, in this case on the 2nd and 4th beats. And finally, a little hi-hat, which is placed on the off beats. And there you go. Once the rhythm is well established, we can remove the metronome. In the beginning, in any case, don't try to play complex things. Try playing fewer, well-placed notes. Let's continue with the bass, this one for example. Here it's a harmonic sound, so we have the chosen scale displayed. Small side note, the keyboard is sensitive to velocity. Don't hesitate to tap on the keys, but without sacrificing precision. The orange keys are the central notes of the scale. Here we have Gs. In most cases, the orange note will be the most important notes in your song. The green keys are the other notes of the scale, those which will bring some musical color to your track. Stay in the lighted path to play in tune. Let's do a simple little bass line on 2 notes and on all the hits of the kick drum. Hit record. And that's it. Once again, complexity will come with practice, don't worry. Now let's make some chords with an electric piano on this preset, which has a little more body. Generally, it's preferable that the instruments play in a coherent way between them. In this example, we'll follow the notes of the bass and play the other 2 notes lit up just below, which we call the 3rd and the 5th. The advantage of the dualo keyboard is that chords are built by simply taking 1 note per row of keys. Let's record that here and now by simply holding each chord for 4 beats. And there you go. Let's take a moment to observe the circle on the screen. It represents the length of the longest loop, with 12 o'clock being its starting point. The dualo allows you to record loops whose lengths will be multiples of the first. Here our bass and piano loops are 8 beats long, twice the length of the drum loops. When you're satisfied with your sound environment, the scale that's displayed allows you to improvise without necessarily recording. Explore the scale. Experiment with small patterns. Follow your chords. You'll quickly learn the combinations that sound good. Side note, on the same horizontal row of keys, you'll find the flats on the outside and the sharps on the inside. These notes might be outside the scale, but can sometimes add a little something. A sound environment that repeats for too long can sometimes become boring for you and your audience. After having created our sound material, let's now play the conductor. Hold down the middle button this time. Our loops are then displayed on the right-hand keyboard. Each horizontal row of keys is a track, with a maximum of 7. On our first track are our 3 recorded drum loops, kick drum, snare, hi-hat. On the second track, our bass, and on the third, our electric piano. In green, the loops are in playback. Touch 1 or more loops briefly to make them go orange, and thus give them the order to be silent. Your order takes effect when the music button is released. This is ideal to let your song breathe from time to time. Like here, removing and then putting back the kick drum and bass often works wonders. Again, practice to find the best recipes and the best times to trigger them. If when recording a loop you make a mistake, you can double-click the middle button to quickly start recording again. Very useful if you make a mistake in a live situation. And to erase a loop, simply hold down the corresponding key until it disappears. This logic is identical to erase a song or reset a sound preset. Also, be aware that you can record loops on the same track. Let's record the second bass line, which will replace the first. Our first bass loop is here, and let's manually arm a recording on the same track. The instrument is then ready to record when the music button is released. And there you go. On our second track, we can switch between the first bass line and the second. Ideal for structuring songs in different parts, for example. Finally, as a bonus, it's good to know that some sounds, like the pads, can be triggered without interruption by holding down the music button or the sound button before releasing a note. This can be practical in certain cases, such as to trigger long vocal samples, for example. To stop a sustained sound, wanted or not, briefly replay the same note or notes, or double-click on the sound button. Let's take a look at the presets, which can be edited by combining the sound button and the settings button. Here, once again, a menu is displayed on the right-hand keyboard, with various settings such as the octave, the release, which determines the duration of a note when it is released, and its additional setting accessible by a double click, the attack, which determines the time the sound takes to arrive. Some reverb, some settings like the filter have sub-settings at the bottom of the keyboard, which are always adjustable in the same way. Double-clicking on certain settings allows you to configure a sweep of their value, such as auto-pan, which enables the sound to oscillate from left to right, or the tremolo, which makes it possible to oscillate the intensity of the sound. The pitch makes it possible to vary the pitch of a played note and is expressed in semitones, that is, the distance between a note and its sharp or flat. For example, you can assign it to the left slider by lightly holding the settings button and stroking the slider, and we can leave the menu to try out the settings. By default, most sounds already have effects assigned, but feel free to experiment with other effects. To unassign a sensor, just perform the same gesture as for the assignment, but on the controller keys. In a song, you can also edit the effects of a loop by double-clicking on it. You will find the same settings as in the preset editor, and you can hear your changes live, ideal for adjusting the volume of certain loops or making your songs evolve in another way. Again, you can exit the menu by touching the settings button. Another important point, in the menu of a loop, you can display the notes played directly on the keyboard thanks to the score setting. This is especially useful if you import a song that you want to learn or relearn to play. In the settings for the song, don't forget that you can decrease the tempo to learn at your own pace. Or even mute the loop in question and play in its place. Finally, don't forget the Do Station software, a very useful companion for updating your instrument, loading new sounds, and even creating your own from the Do Sound tab. In the Do Music tab, rename and save your songs stored in memory. In the Do Community tab, you can find a platform for sharing sounds and songs created by other players. Feel free to share yours. Don't forget to take a look at the Do Game tab, which offers interactive tutorials to load into your instrument, to learn musical concepts, musical vocabulary from many styles to reuse in your own compositions, and even to replay some famous songs. The first tutorials for each available region are free, so take the opportunity to try it out and subscribe in the Profile tab to get access to other content published regularly. There you go, you now have all the keys to start your career as a dualist. Don't hesitate to consult the practical guide online, which picks up and goes into more depth of everything we've seen here. If you have any questions, you can discuss with the community and its various points of contact, or write to us directly. All that's left for me to do is to wish you a good playing and see you soon in the Dualo community.